My name is Diana Taylor. I'm 44 years old. I've been married to Eric for 21 years. And last Friday at 1:13 p.m., I saw my husband hug another woman. Then he knelt down, kissed a little girl's forehead, and she called him something I never imagined I'd hear. Daddy. That was the moment my lungs forgot how to breathe. I had come to surprise him. That morning I'd made his favorite lunch, honey mustard chicken and a soft ciabatta roll with those spicy dill pickles he loves. Not store-bought. I pickle them myself just the way his mother taught me. He had a big client meeting that day. He'd been tense all week, so I thought, why not show up? Bring him lunch. Remind him he's not alone, that I still see him. I even packed his favorite brand of ginger ale. I called his office from the car to make sure he wasn't in a meeting, and his assistant Cheryl said he just stepped out to take a private call. Said he always went behind the building to the park, where it's quieter. Perfect, I thought. I'll surprise him. I remember pulling up along the back lot and spotting him right away. He was standing near the walking path, under one of the tall oak trees. His back was to me. He had on the blue blazer I just had dry cleaned. And then I saw her. A woman in her late 30s, maybe, shoulder-length chestnut hair, plain white blouse, jeans. She looked tired. Not glamorous. Not seductive. Just someone who looked like she hadn't slept through the night in weeks. She was crying. And Eric, my Eric, reached out and held her. Not a handshake. Not a quick pat. A real hug. The kind of hug you give someone when you're the only thing holding them together. My foot froze on the brake. My hands trembled on the wheel. Then the child stepped into view. She had curly hair, pulled into two frizzy pigtails. She clutched a tattered stuffed bunny and wore glittery sneakers that lit up when she shuffled. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. And when she ran up and threw her arms around Eric's leg, he didn't step back. He bent down, smiled, kissed the top of her head, and she looked up and said, clear as daylight, I missed you, Daddy. I didn't hear anything else after that. Not the birds. Not the traffic. Not even the sound of my own heart breaking. I just reversed the car slowly, as if the wheels might make a noise that would give me away. And then I drove. Nowhere really. Just away. I didn't cry at first. I didn't scream or pound the steering wheel, or throw his ginger ale out the window. I just drove. I remember turning off the main road, heading toward the bluffs. There's a spot overlooking the lake. We used to go there when Nathan was little. Before the bills. Before the long silences. Before everything became normal. I parked and stared at the water for what felt like hours. My hand still clutched the paper bag with his lunch. I thought about everything at once and nothing at all. I thought about the time I found a hotel receipt in his glove compartment, and he said it was from a conference. I thought about the way he'd started locking his phone. About the night he came home late with a smudge of lipstick on his shirt, and swore it was from a handshake with a client's wife. But I also thought about the way he still kissed my forehead every morning. The way he still said, I love you, when he left for work. The way he still reached for my hand during the sad parts of movies. And I asked myself the question no woman wants to ask after 20 years. How much of it was real? Maybe I would have felt more in control if the woman had been glamorous, seductive, someone I could frame as the other woman. But she wasn't. She was just real. And the child didn't look like a stranger. She looked like someone who belonged to him. I didn't go home that night. I called my sister Laura, told her I needed space. She didn't press. I stayed in her guest room, lay on my back staring at the ceiling fan. And in that spinning blur, I saw my whole marriage replaying on a loop. The anniversaries I planned alone. The vacations I canceled when he couldn't get away. The times he said I was too sensitive. When I noticed how often he lied about small things. The way he started calling me Mom instead of Diana, Like I'd been reduced to a function. I wasn't angry yet. That would come later. What I felt most that night was shame. Shame that I didn't see it sooner. Shame that I still wanted to believe there had to be some explanation. And most of all, shame that I wasn't sure I even wanted to know the truth, because what if the truth was worse than the lies? The next morning I drove home early, before Eric could ask where I'd gone. I needed to see him, not to confront him but to watch him. Sometimes silence tells you more than words. He was at the breakfast table scrolling his phone, sipping the coffee I'd programmed the night before. He smiled when I walked in. Smiled. "Hey babe. You okay? You were out late." I stared at him. That face. That voice. That man I had given my best years to. I wanted to scream. Who is he? Who is the child? How long have you been living a double life? But I didn't. Instead I smiled back and said, "Just needed some air." He nodded, took another sip, and then he told me how crazy busy his day had been. How he'd missed lunch and had to grab a protein bar from Cheryl's desk. I looked at the paper bag in my purse. He didn't even see me. And that's when the real betrayal hit me. Not that he was hiding something, but he didn't even feel bad doing it. That moment, more than the hug, more than the child's voice, was what broke me. Because it told me one thing loud and clear. He didn't think I was worth the truth. There's a moment, after your world cracks open, when everything that used to feel familiar suddenly feels like a set. Like you're walking through a play you didn't know you were performing in. Repeating lines you didn't write. Playing a role you no longer believe in. That week I went through the motions: dinner, laundry, checking the mail, asking about Nathan's classes on our weekly calls, but I felt like a ghost in my own life. Watching myself fold Eric's socks while wondering if he'd done the same for someone else's child. Listening to him talk about business meetings while seeing that little girl's face flash behind my eyes. I wanted to scream, but instead I smiled, and cooked, and swallowed my questions like pills. Because that's what good wives do, right? We hold the house together even as it burns. Eric and I met in college. I was in nursing school. He was a business major, full of ideas and ambition and charm. He could talk anyone into anything, and often did. He made me laugh when I was too serious. Told me I was beautiful when I couldn't see it. I loved him instantly. By the time we graduated, we were engaged. I had student loans. He had a job offer and a dream. A small startup in logistics tech. We couldn't afford both of us chasing careers. So I paused my nursing plans for now, and took an admin job to pay bills while he built his company. For a year, we said. Just until we're stable. But then the startup needed more time. And then I got pregnant. And then his company started growing slowly, then all at once. And I became just the wife. I was never bitter about it, not at first. I loved being there for Nathan. I made birthday cakes from scratch, sewed his Halloween costumes, volunteered at the school library. But even then there were signs. Eric started introducing me as Nathan's mom more than my wife. He stopped asking how my day was. Stopped seeing me. The first time I heard someone call me a full-time homemaker, it stung. Not because it wasn't true, but because it wasn't seen as enough. Not by them. And eventually not by him. I remember one night years ago sitting across from Eric after dinner. Nathan was at a sleepover. We had the whole evening to ourselves. I reached across the table and said, "Do you ever think about what I gave up?" He blinked. Confused. Like he didn't understand the question. "What do you mean?" he asked. "My career. My degree. All of it." He shrugged. "You're a great mom. That's what matters, right?" And that was that. Looking back now, I don't think he meant to hurt me. But that's the thing about emotional erasure. It doesn't require cruelty. It just requires disinterest. You don't have to be mean to make someone feel small. You just have to stop noticing them. And that's what he did. Bit by bit. Day by day. Until I became the person who kept the fridge stocked, the towels folded, the birthdays remembered, while he became the man who got standing ovations at conferences for building something from the ground up. I was the foundation, but he was the name on the building. After I saw him in the park, every memory began to replay in a different light. The time he came back from a weekend conference with a stuffed unicorn in his suitcase, said it was a vendor giveaway. The random Amazon packages addressed to him, filled with coloring books and dolls, he claimed they were gifts for a coworker's daughter. The day I overheard that phone call, it was months ago. He was in the kitchen. I was in the hallway folding laundry. He said, "I'm doing what I can, okay? But she's not mine. I'm not on the birth certificate." A pause. Then, "She's been through enough. I can't just disappear." When I asked him about it later, he said it was a vendor with a custody issue. I believed him. Because belief is easier than chaos. Because women like me, who build their lives around holding others up, are taught to doubt our instincts before we doubt our husbands. That week I started making a list. Not of suspicions. Not of evidence. A list of ways I had disappeared. The way he stopped looking up from his phone when I entered a room. How he never asked what books I was reading. How I made dinner every night, and he never noticed when I changed the recipe. How I had stopped dressing up, because compliments had disappeared years ago. How he'd stopped touching me without purpose. No more hand on the lower back. No more kiss on the neck. Just obligatory, functional intimacy, if that. And yet, I had kept loving him. Even as I vanished from his attention. Even as I faded from his world. Even as another woman's child now called him daddy. My sister Laura came by unannounced one morning that week. She brought coffee and a new sweater she found on sale. Said the color reminded her of my eyes. I burst into tears before I could even say hello. We sat at the kitchen table, and I told her everything. The hug, the child, the lies, the phone call, the quiet unraveling I hadn't even noticed until now. She didn't gasp, didn't say, "I told you so." She just held my hand and said, "Dee, when did you last feel loved?" I opened my mouth to answer, and realized I didn't know. Later that night, Eric came home later than usual. Said traffic was awful. Smiled. Kissed my cheek. I watched him as he loosened his tie, poured himself a drink, and asked me what was for dinner. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the glass against the wall and yell, "Tell me about the girl. Tell me about her mother. Tell me why I have to learn the truth by accident like some stranger spying through a window." But instead I said, "Lasagna. Your favorite." And I hated myself for it. Because in that moment I realized something gutting. He had built an entire other life. And I had built a prison out of politeness. That night, I stood in the bathroom brushing my teeth and stared at my reflection. Not the crow's feet. Not the gray strands. I looked into my own eyes, and I didn't recognize them. I whispered aloud, "Who are you?" And the silence answered. The next morning I opened my laptop, searched for something I hadn't typed in 20 years. Online RN bridge programs for adults over 40. Because if I was going to uncover the truth and decide what to do next, I needed to find the woman I used to be. The woman who had dreams of saving lives. Not just surviving in someone else's shadow. The Monday after I saw him in the park, I couldn't take it anymore. The waiting. The pretending. The burning questions crawling under my skin. I needed answers. And if Eric wasn't going to give them to me, I'd find them myself. I told him I was going to a women's luncheon at the community center. He barely looked up from his tablet. "That's great, babe. Take some time for yourself." Take some time for myself. The irony nearly made me laugh. Instead, I got into my car, parked 2 blocks from his office and waited. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew how he moved, his habits, his patterns. After 20 years of watching him live, I knew him better than he knew himself. At exactly 12:12 p.m., he exited the building.
No briefcase.
No phone. Just his jacket and a quiet, determined walk toward the back park entrance. I followed on foot, heart pounding, palms clammy. And there they were. The woman, Clara, was already waiting, sitting on a bench under the same oak tree where I'd first seen them. The little girl was running circles in the grass, giggling, chasing a butterfly. Her curls bounced with every step. Her laugh was wild and free. Eric walked up and crouched down beside her. She leapt into his arms. He hugged her tight, spun her once, and I saw it, the look. That expression I hadn't seen on his face in years. Unfiltered joy. He sat beside Clara. They spoke quietly, heads close. She looked tired again. Pale. She rubbed her forehead like it ached constantly. He reached into his coat and pulled out what looked like a small envelope, then a pill bottle. She took both, tucked them in her purse, then wiped her eyes. This wasn't an affair. This wasn't flirting. This was something else. And the worst part? It didn't make me feel better. It made me feel even more excluded. Not only was I not his partner anymore, I wasn't even someone he trusted with the burden. He was carrying something huge, secret, quiet, and he'd chosen to carry it with her. I followed Clara's car when she left. I told myself it wasn't stalking. I told myself I had a right to know. I watched as she drove to a rundown apartment complex on the edge of town, the kind with rusted railings and chipped paint.
No dorman. No elevator.
She walked slowly, the child holding her hand, tired feet, a limp in her right step I hadn't noticed before. My stomach twisted. They didn't look like people Eric would keep around for fun or flattery. They looked like people surviving. The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. I walked into a coffee shop Clara had just exited, as if by accident, and pretended to bump into her. She blinked, startled, then smiled politely. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, pulling her daughter behind her. "Are you okay?" I smiled back.
Totally fine.
"I think I've seen you before. Do you work downtown?" Her eyes darted, nervous, protective. The child stared up at me, silent, but there was something oddly familiar in her eyes. A softness, a knowing. Clara nodded slowly.
I'm Clara.
"And this is Sophie." Sophie. Hearing her name hit like a pin to the chest. I crouched slightly.
Sophia.
That's a beautiful name. She didn't answer, just held her bunny tighter. Clara glanced at her, then back at me. "We're just headed to the clinic. She's got her weekly blood work." Weekly blood work. My stomach sank. "She okay?" I asked softly. Clara hesitated, then said, "She's been in remission for 2 years. But it was aggressive. We still monitor." My throat burned. I wanted to cry and scream and run all at once. Clara shifted her purse on her shoulder. "Sorry, we really have to." Then she paused, looked me straight in the eye, and said with a softness I wasn't prepared for, "You're Diana, aren't you?" Time stopped. I blinked. How do you?" She gave a sad smile. "He talks about you. A lot." I swallowed hard. Clara took a slow breath. "Look, I know you probably hate me, and I would too in your shoes. But thank you." That threw me. "For what?" She looked down at Sophie. "For forgiving him. For letting him be in her life. You must be a saint." I felt dizzy. Forgiving him? Letting him? I didn't even know she existed until a few days ago. My mouth opened, but no words came out. She nodded gently. I hope you stay that kind. She's already lost so much. And then she took Sophie's hand and walked away. I sat in my car for almost an hour. The sentence kept echoing in my mind. You must be a saint. She thought I knew. She thought I'd allowed this. She thought we were all in it together. And yet I'd been the one left in the dark, like some extra in a story they were writing together. That night, I stared at Eric across the dinner table. He was reading a spreadsheet on his iPad. I was pushing peas around my plate. Did your meeting go well? I asked casually. He nodded. Clients expanding. Might be traveling to Denver next month. I sipped my water. And how's Sophie? He froze. 1 second. 2. Then he looked up slowly. What? I didn't blink. Sophie. The little girl you see at lunch. The one who calls you daddy. His face drained of color. He put the iPad down. How do you? I saw you. Last Friday. In the park. Silence. Then slowly he whispered. Diana, I can explain. I stared at him. Then do. Eric sat frozen across from me, the color drained from his face. The air between us had thickened, like silence with a weight. He opened his mouth but nothing came out. Not right away. Start, I said, voice even low. I've seen the girl. I've met the mother. I've watched you hug them like family. And I want to hear the truth from you. Not from whispers, not from guesses. From you. Now. He closed his eyes, rubbed his face like someone trying to slow time. Then he said 4 words I wasn't expecting. She's not my daughter. That made me pause. He looked up, eyes raw. Not by blood. But she calls me that. And I let her. Because no one else ever showed up for her the way she needed. I blinked. Then explain it to me. All of it. And so he did. 6 years ago, Eric had signed up for a bone marrow registry. I remember it vaguely now. A conversation over dinner about his friend Mike's son, who had leukemia. Eric was moved, said, if I can help someone like that, I want to. A year later he got the call. He was a match. He never told me. He said he didn't want me to worry. He flew to another city, did the procedure. Came home with a sore back, said it was from a pulled muscle at the gym. Then the hospital called again. The child, Sophie, had relapsed. Her body was rejecting treatment. The mother, Clara, had no family. The girl's father had vanished after diagnosis. Eric visited once. Just to check in. Once became weekly. She reminded me of Nathan, he said softly. Same curiosity. Same way of over-apologizing when she spilled juice or knocked something over. He brought toys. Groceries. Paid some bills. All in secret. She called me Mr. Eric at first. Then when she got better, she started calling me Daddy. I was silent, staring. And you never told me. He nodded slowly. I didn't want you to worry. I didn't want to complicate things. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. You didn't want to complicate what, Eric? Your marriage. Or your guilt. He reached out. Diana, I stepped back. You held this for 6 years. 6 years of lies. Of birthdays. Of work trips that weren't work trips. Of me packing your lunch while you took care of a child you never told me existed. She was dying, he said quietly. And she needed someone consistent. I didn't cheat on you. I didn't lie to you because I was ashamed. I lied because I thought I was doing something good. And I knew how it would look. You knew how it would feel, I snapped. Silence. He lowered his gaze. She's not mine. Not biologically. But she's mine emotionally. I've watched her grow up. I've seen her fight for life. She's family now. That was the word that split me in two. Family. He gave her that label. Without asking me. Without inviting me in, he built a second emotional world, while mine stood hollow and aching. I was your family, I said, voice breaking. I am your family. Or I thought I was. He reached out again. You still are. I stepped further away. Then why didn't you trust me with the truth? He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. I spent that night on the couch. The next morning he made coffee like nothing happened. Asked if I wanted eggs. I stared at him. You're making breakfast like I didn't just find out you've been emotionally co-parenting a child behind my back for 6 years. He put the spatula down. What do you want me to do? I looked him in the eye. I want you to tell me what I am to you now. He said nothing. Because that was the problem. I wasn't the wife he confided in anymore. I was the placeholder. The silent support beam. The woman who made things easier by not asking questions. But I was done with that. I didn't scream. I didn't pack a bag or storm out. I did what women like me do when the world cracks open. I got organized. I made a list. This time, not of erasures, but of actions. I called a lawyer. Quietly. Just to ask. I pulled our old wills from the fireproof safe. I requested copies of our joint accounts, property titles, and business filings. And I opened a new notebook, a red leather one I'd been saving, and wrote at the top of page 1. I am not invisible. A week later, I stood in Sophie's bedroom. Clara had invited me, gently, cautiously, after I'd run into her again and asked to talk. I didn't know. I told her honestly. He never told me. Her face softened. I'm so sorry. I assumed you'd allowed it. That you were this incredibly compassionate woman who wanted to help a sick kid. I gave a bitter laugh. I didn't even know she existed. She looked embarrassed. You must be furious. Fury comes later, I said. Right now, I'm grieving a marriage I didn't realize had ended. Clara led me inside. Sophie was drawing on the floor. A picture of her, a man and a bunny. She looked up and smiled shyly. Sweetheart. She pointed at the picture. That's me. And Daddy. And Hopsy. Where's Mommy? I asked. She's on the moon today, she whispered. She gets tired. But Daddy said the moon is good for naps. I swallowed hard. That's what Eric had said to Nathan once years ago, when I'd been in the hospital after surgery. He'd recycled the same comfort. The same words. For another child. Clara walked me out afterward. I'm not in love with him, she said, unprompted. I don't want him. He's been the only one who stayed. And Sophie clung to that. I nodded. I understand. Do you hate her? She asked. Be honest. No, I said. And I meant it. I hate what was stolen from me. Not her. Clara's eyes glistened. I thought you must be a saint. I looked her in the eye. No. Just a woman who deserved the truth. She nodded. And for the first time we saw each other not as rivals but as women shaped by loss. Later that night Eric asked where I'd gone. To meet your daughter, I said plainly. He looked up alarmed. I held up a hand. Relax. No fights. I needed to meet the person you gave your heart to. He looked away. I sat across from him. I'm not leaving. Not today. But we're not okay. I know. And I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen. I don't expect you to. But I'm done playing the part of a woman who doesn't have a voice. He nodded. I stood up and as I walked away I said one last thing. You gave her your time, your care, your protection. All I ever wanted was your honesty. And I meant every word. 2 weeks passed. Not much was said between us. We didn't fight. We didn't heal. We just floated. The house became quieter. Not tense, just muted. He tiptoed. I withdrew. We danced around each other like strangers in a shared hotel room, waiting for checkout. Then came the envelope. It was hand-delivered by Clara, folded with a child sticker on the seal. A glittery pink unicorn with a crooked smile. Inside was a party invitation. Sophie turned 7. Join us for cake, music and bubbles. 2 p.m. Community Center Hall A, RSVP. Clara and Eric. I stared at the RSVP line. Clara and Eric. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't even formal. It was just a quiet truth made visible. They were the grown-ups in her life. And I was a question mark. I waited until after dinner to ask. Eric was cleaning up, a rare gesture lately, rinsing plates like he hoped small acts might patch deeper holes. Clara invited me to Sophie's party, I said. He stopped, rinsed one more plate, turned. I didn't know she would. She didn't ask if I'd come, I said. She just assumed I was now part of the knowledge. He nodded slowly. Do you want to go? I didn't answer right away. Then I said, yes. I didn't go to be polite or to show support. I went because I needed to see her world, the one I'd been excluded from. I needed to see what he had chosen to protect. And more importantly, what I was protecting myself from. The community center was cheerful, chaotic, loud, full of folding chairs, paper streamers, and small children sugared up on juice boxes. Clara greeted me with a hesitant smile. She wore a faded yellow cardigan, a blue plastic whistle around her neck, and exhaustion in her eyes. Sophie ran up, covered in face paint and joy, and threw her arms around Eric. He lifted her effortlessly. Then her eyes turned to me. She blinked, then smiled softly, curiously, and said, "Hi again." "Happy birthday," I said. "You look like a rainbow." She beamed. "I'm a tiger princess. You wear it well." She skipped off to the bubble machine, trailing glitter and laughter. I sat at a corner table, watching the party unfold. Eric moved comfortably in the space, tying balloon strings, passing napkins, crouching to tie a child's shoe. He wasn't hiding. He was rooted. People greeted him with familiarity. Parents who clearly knew him, kids who called him Sophie's dad, volunteers who smiled and waved like he belonged. And there I was, the guest, the woman no one knew how to introduce. Clara came over halfway through. She handed me a slice of cake and said, "She was so happy you came." I nodded, eyes fixed on the children. "She's a beautiful child," I said. "She is." We stood in silence a moment. Then I asked, "Does she know?" Clara tilted her head. "That you're not together. That he has another home. A wife." Clara nodded. "She knows he lives with someone else. But she doesn't understand the mechanics of betrayal." I looked at her sharply. She smiled, not unkindly. "I don't mean that in a cruel way. I just mean she doesn't carry your grief." No, she carried her own. At the end of the party, Sophie handed out homemade thank you cards. Crayon drawings, glittered edges. She placed one in my hand with care. "It's a bunny," she said. "Like Hopsy, but for you." I opened it later in the car. Inside, she'd drawn a picture of 4 people, her, Clara, Eric, and me. I wasn't labeled, just present. My heart caught in my throat. That night, I sat across from Eric at our kitchen table. The same one where we'd shared anniversaries, homework, burnt roast chickens, silent tears. "I'm not angry at her," I said. He looked up, startled. "Or Clara. Or even you. Not anymore." His mouth opened. Then, "I'm not done," I said. He quieted. "I'm angry that I was made invisible. That you lived a second life in plain sight, and I wasn't allowed to see it. Not because you were protecting me, but because I wasn't considered part of the decision." He nodded slowly. "I need to rebuild something, Eric. Not just trust. Myself." What does that mean? It means I'm rewriting our will. He blinked. Why? Because everything's changed. And I need the truth reflected in the legal paper, not just our awkward silences. I didn't give her anything. You gave her your presence, your time, your responsibility. You made decisions with Clara that involved our future, emotional or not. He stared. I'm not punishing you, I said, but I'm protecting me. Finally, later that night, I sat at the kitchen counter, red notebook in hand. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "When you are no longer someone's first loyalty, make yourself your own." Then I opened a tab on my laptop and searched for an estate attorney, because I wasn't going to be erased again. I sat across from the estate attorney, hands folded tightly in my lap. Her office was calm, soft gray tones, the smell of lavender diffusing quietly from a corner humidifier. But inside me a storm raged. She glanced over the documents I'd brought. Our original will, drafted 10 years ago. Joint assets, business holdings, Nathan's trust. Everything standard. Then she looked up. And what are we updating today? I took a breath. The kind that anchors you before you shift tectonic plates. I need to protect myself, I said. My name. My place. My legacy. She nodded slowly. From your husband? No, I said. From the version of me I let vanish. I hadn't told Eric I was doing this. Not to be sneaky, but because this action needed to be mine alone. 4 years I had let our life be shaped by his timing, his vision, his calendar. He'd made quiet decisions on my behalf. This was mine. The attorney walked me through options. Language. Legal terms that felt sterile but somehow sacred. We restructured the trust. Split our joint assets, not with vengeance but with boundaries. I preserved Nathan's share, but adjusted it into a private, protected fund, solely in my control until he turned 30. And then, I added Sophie. Yes, Sophie, because her situation was not her fault. But not the way Eric had, not a blank check behind my back. I wrote this clause carefully. An educational and medical trust will be established in Sophie Daniels' name, accessible only for schooling, housing, and medical needs, with Diana Taylor as the sole trustee. This trust is not a declaration of parenthood, but of human decency. Then I made the final change. I removed Eric's sole executorship of the estate. He would now require my approval for any movement of joint assets, properties, or future investments. Not because I didn't trust him with money, but because I could no longer trust him with truth. I left the attorney's office with a small stack of documents and something heavier. Certainty. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what would happen next. Because now, I wasn't waiting for someone else to choose for me. That evening, I slid the updated documents across the kitchen table. Eric looked at them, then at me. What's this? The new will. He flipped through a few pages, eyebrows raising slowly. You added her? I added a trust, I corrected. That's not the same. His voice dropped. You didn't have to do that. I know, I said. But I did. Because she's a child. And I'm not going to be the woman who lets a child suffer to prove a point. He swallowed. But you, I said, are no longer the man who gets to make those choices alone. He looked at the clause giving me shared control of our estate. His hands were still, but his jaw clenched. You don't trust me anymore, he said quietly. I met his eyes. I trust you to be kind, I said. I trust you to show up. I even trust you to mean well. But I do not trust you to put me first. His mouth opened then closed. Because it was true. He had proven that. I handed him a note, handwritten, folded once. He looked down confused. Then read. This isn't revenge. This is repair. You chose secrecy. I choose clarity. Diana, he didn't speak. He just folded the note slowly, pressed his fingers to it like it was a wound. That night I lay in bed alone. Not because he left, he slept on the couch, but because I needed that space. The silence. The separation from the version of me who once thought a wedding band was the same as security. I flipped through my red notebook and wrote, "A woman does not become powerful by shouting. She becomes powerful by seeing herself clearly and refusing to vanish again." Over the next week, something shifted in the house. Eric became quieter. Not because he was afraid, but because I think he realized something deep I had returned. Not as the version of me who folded towels and filled silence, but the version who carried herself like someone worth the whole truth. He started asking things he hadn't in years. "Are you okay with this? Do you want to join this call? What do you think we should do?" And the strangest part? I didn't feel triumphant. I felt equal. Like I'd finally walked back into my own story. One evening, as we sat across from each other in silence, him reading news, me reviewing nursing school re-enrollment emails, he spoke. "You're different," he said. I looked up.
No. I'm remembering.
Nathan graduated summa cum laude that spring. My baby, now 22, broad-shouldered, warm-eyed, walked across a stage in a navy gown that billowed in the wind like a cape. He wore his father's jaw and my stubbornness, and as I sat in the audience surrounded by applause and camera flashes, I wondered if anyone knew what it took for him to get here. What it took me to get him here. Behind every successful man, they say, is a woman. But no one ever asks what she had to lose to lift him that high. The university hosted a private dinner for top graduates and their families. Catered elegant cloth napkins, sparkling cider, a string quartet humming through Bach and Beatles covers. Parents wore suits. Mothers wore soft-smiled pride like perfume. I wore navy, the same shade I'd worn to Sophie's party. But this time, I wasn't hiding. Eric was seated beside me, calm, polished. He'd been attentive all evening, pulled out my chair, topped off my water, laughed at my sister's jokes. But he hadn't touched me, because we both knew something between us had shifted for good. Halfway through dinner, the program coordinator stood up and tapped her glass. "We'd like to invite a few families to share words for their graduates." A murmur swept the room. A father stood up first, then a grandmother, then a pair of twin siblings. Then Eric stood. I didn't stop him. He adjusted his tie, held the mic awkwardly, and began, "Nathan," he said, voice steady, "you're everything I hoped a son would be. Brilliant, decent, focused. You've carried this family's name with strength. You've made us proud, especially your mother." He glanced at me. "And to Diana, thank you for being the quiet force behind all of this." I stiffened. Quiet force. Two words that reduced 2 decades of sacrifice into background music. I smiled politely. He sat down. And then slowly, deliberately, I stood up. A few heads turned. I didn't ask for the mic. I just raised my voice gently, firmly, and said, "If I may." The room hushed. I turned to face Nathan. "My darling," I began, "you've always been my greatest masterpiece. Not because of your grades or your degree, but because you made me rediscover my strength every time I thought I'd lost it." He smiled, eyes shimmering. "But tonight," I continued, "I don't want to just thank you. I want to thank me." People blinked. Some eyebrows lifted. "I want to thank the woman who stayed up until 3 a.m. gluing science fair boards when you were too tired to finish. The woman who worked weekends to afford your soccer camps. The woman who held your father's hand when the business failed, and who ironed his shirts when he rose again." A hush fell. "And I want to say something else. Something I've never said out loud before." I turned slightly, not just toward Nathan, but toward the room. For a long time I believed love meant staying small, meant being the quiet force, the background, the helper. I thought being invisible was noble. I took a breath. It's not. Eric stared, frozen. Nathan, my wish for you is this. Never love someone quietly. Never erase their name from your story to make others comfortable. And never ever treat the person holding you up like they're lucky just to be there. The room was silent. Then someone clapped. Then more. Soft. Then louder. It wasn't a standing ovation. It was something better. Respect. Later that night, as we walked to the car, Eric finally spoke. You didn't tell me you were going to speak. I didn't owe you that, I said gently. He nodded. You were right. About all of it. I looked at him. For the first time in a long time I didn't feel rage. Or hurt. I felt peace. I wasn't trying to hurt you, I said. I was trying to stop hurting myself. He looked at me, then really looked. And I knew in that moment, he saw the woman he'd forgotten. The one he used to admire. The one who built this family from her own bare hands. That night, I sat at my vanity and removed my earrings slowly. I caught my reflection in the mirror and paused. Because for the first time in years, I didn't see someone waiting to be loved. I saw someone who had chosen herself. And that, I realized, is the most radical act of all. I didn't leave him. That surprises people when I tell them the story. As if justice only lives in divorce papers or empty closets. But not all betrayals demand destruction. Some demand clarity, boundaries, and a quiet, soul-deep return to yourself. Eric and I stayed in the same house. But the roles shifted. He began asking, not assuming. Listening, not performing. Offering space, not explanations. There were no grand gestures. No second honeymoon. Just a man realizing the floor beneath his life had been held up by a woman he forgot to look at. And a woman who finally stopped disappearing into the wallpaper. I applied to nursing school the following fall. A bridge program for women over 40. Flexible, rigorous, and full of second chance seekers like me. On the first day of orientation, I packed a new notebook, a navy blue pen, and a picture of Nathan on his graduation day. The last time I'd stepped into a classroom as a student, I'd worn butterfly clips and worry. This time I walked in wearing resolve. Every Sunday, I now drive across town to visit a small library where I volunteer in the reading corner. One day, a girl with frizzy curls and glittery sneakers walked in. Sophie. She looked older somehow. Stronger. She ran up to me and hugged my waist. I lost my front tooth, she said proudly. I laughed. Are the tooth fairies still paying well these days? $5, she beamed. She handed me a folded note. A drawing me, her and Hopsy the bunny. We stood beside a big red heart with a sign over it that said, "Nice people don't leave." I blinked back tears. Because she didn't see me as a villain. Or a threat. Or a ghost. She saw me as someone who stayed. That night I reread one of the first entries I'd written in my red notebook. I wasn't the woman he cheated on. I was the woman he didn't trust with the truth. And now, I'm the woman who came back to herself. Clara and I aren't friends. Not exactly. But we've found a rhythm. A respect. We co-sign field trip slips. We trade recipes. We email back and forth about school supplies and Sophie's favorite bedtime books. She told me once, "I thought you'd hate me forever." I said I did. Until I realized you were never the one who owed me the truth. She nodded. But I'm grateful you came anyway. You didn't have to. No, I said. But she needed another woman who stayed. Eric and I sleep in the same room now, but in separate beds. We laugh more. We talk honestly. We haven't rebuilt love. But we've built something maybe more radical. A kind of earned decency. He knows now not to use the word just when describing who I am. Not just the wife. Not just the mother. Not just someone who helped. I am the person who gave 20 years, then reclaimed the rest. Sometimes I get messages after people hear this story. They say, "You should have burned it all down. You should have left him. You should have taken everything." But I didn't want everything. I wanted myself. And I found her. In a girl's crayon drawing. In a red notebook. In a mirror I finally stopped avoiding. If you've ever felt invisible in your own marriage, your own family, your own life. If you've ever handed out love like bread while starving inside yourself. If you've ever wondered if it's too late to come back to who you were before you bent so far you almost disappeared. Let me tell you something. You can reclaim your story. And you don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to believe you're worth hearing.
I'm Diana Taylor.
And I am not the woman who was left. I am the woman who stayed. With grace. With clarity. With myself.